Well, yeah, I mean, I think another way to put the problem is egotistical thinking, right? I mean, a certain, the ego not only elevates the self and the subject as in opposition to the object, it also builds walls. It's defensive. It's a defensive structure. And one of the things I found most powerful about psychedelics was its ability to transcend ego, either soften it or obliterate it, depending on the particular experience. And I do see the usefulness of that. I think that we arrive at a really difficult crossing though when we figure out, okay, we have a tool that does this, that seems to be an antidote to this problem of egotistical thinking and a sense of separateness. But then what do you do? And I think that has been a dilemma from the very beginning of psychedelics. And I wrote about this a little in my book. That there was the Timothy Leary model that the answer to this is to turn on as many people as you can. And he even calculated how many millions of Americans would have to take LSD or psilocybin before the culture changed. I forget, it was 3 or 4 million. And then you had other people who were very alarmed at that approach and thought that it was such a powerful substance, it wasn't for everybody, and that maybe you should, this is Aldous Huxley or Al Hubbard, maybe you should give it to the elites or influencers, and this kind of consciousness would filter down. So it's one thing to have a drug or a medicine that answers to our needs, and then it's another thing like, well, okay, well, how do you introduce it to society? I'm curious to know what your thoughts about that are.
Yeah.
And I would add a layer of question around that too. How do we introduce it to people in a way that honors the Indigenous people that first worked with it, and then also the sort of the duality of, right now there's definitely increased awareness and a kind of a movement. You talked about giving it to the elite of society, and we're certainly seeing that with the interest in Silicon Valley tech executives and such, and then how it filters down. In one hand, that's so great, right? Because it's this interest in this powerful tool that you wrote about, Michael, in how to change your mind. It's like that broadening of interest in this powerful tool, but then also teaching the sacred responsibility of how to use it, both safely and spiritually and all that. So I'm curious about that too.
The very fact that so many people in Western culture, I don't know what the percentage is, that are on some kind of prescription drug or tranquilizer or something like that, speaks to the angst that majority of people are feeling. This is pre-COVID. Of course, with COVID, it's on steroids. But existential angst about we have such incredible material abundance, but instead of bringing us more peace of mind, it's done just the opposite. So a starting place, I think, might be it's basically raising people's consciousness about offering them an opportunity to address that existential angst that has been used for tens of thousands of years by people around the world who pay attention to how nature actually works. Because if they don't pay attention to it, they're not going to live in harmony with it, and they're going to get recycled. The indigenous people here where I live, the ancestor spirits, the Pomo and Miwok, and they've been around here for at least 10 or 15,000 years. Is our culture right now going to be around in 10 or 15,000 years? Not the way we're going now. So they didn't have the material possessions or abundance that we have, and our culture and its ignorance, its arrogance and ignorance says that it's a primitive culture because it didn't have the material advancement that we have. But they had an understanding about how reality works and how to live in harmony and balance with it. increasing information to people. Number one, here's a problem. Here's the here's the root of that problem that we both agree on. Now this Newtonian perspective on what reality is based on perceptions of separation, that's not been the history of our people, of humanity, for our time on the planet. That's a relatively recent newcomer. It comes out of the Industrial Revolution and the Renaissance and the emphasis on the individual. And of course, there's wonderful aspects to that, the individual rights and the importance of that. But we've lost the larger context of understanding about right relationship with this incredible, like Martin Luther King's phrase, this world home that we've inhabited. And our technology's reached the place where it's poisoning the earth and has the potential to eliminate us through a nuclear holocaust or whatever. And we don't have that much more time to wake up. So the indigenous people around the world have in their history the understanding of a different conceptual framework of what true reality is, the interconnected oneness. That's what we need to get back to. That's what we need to open our awareness to, an experiential sense of understanding. So it's not just an abstraction, but we are all connected, and what we do to the other, we do to our children, we do to our grandchildren, what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves, we do to our grandparents. So there's a track record before we got off into this bender of the Newtonian perceptions of reality as objects that the people had from paying attention to how things works. And one of the main things they learned about how things works, that all around the world there's certain plants that we eat that give us life. Without those plants, we're not going to be able to live. There's certain category of other plants that grow in different form, different manifestations around the world that aren't for feeding our physical bodies, but are for feeding our spiritual bodies, helping us to attune, open awareness, interconnecting with the awareness of cosmic consciousness, the oneness, the interconnectedness of it all. And when we have that experience that the indigenous people cultivated through the rites of passage, which the young people introducing them to these plants in ceremonies with the elders, it passed on from one generation to the next, right relationship, respectful right relationship with these powers of creation that give us life. So there's a model there of how to use these substances responsibly, because they can be used irresponsibly, and they are power, just like fire, just like atomic energy, and they can be used in hurtful ways and destructive ways. And it's not inherent that just because you eat the plant or the pill or the derivative of it or whatever, that you're going to have a blissful experience of cosmic consciousness. It has the potential for that to be so, but a lot of that is dependent on the set and setting, your intention that the person takes into it, how to prepare for it. And I think a key dynamic in that regard is recognizing that it's not just a physical substance you're taking, but you're taking a substance, a material that has a spiritual entity, a consciousness to it, that comes from nature, is a manifestation of nature and the wisdom of nature, which is the wisdom of the cosmos, of God, of spirit, whatever you want to call it, manifesting through nature. So I think raising consciousness about, hey, here's the problem, here's the root problem of it. There's ways to address this that we have models for that are socially integrative models in these cultures that can open the doorway of awareness to be able to look at our human needs, our collective human needs, and how to meet them in a way that creates a win-win-win world for all people, all beings living in harmony, justice, and balance. And raising consciousness about the root problem of it, here's a means of addressing it for people who feel a desire to heal their own existential angst, to be able to recognize that your material acquisitions have not brought you peace of mind. Because you mentioned the ego identity. As soon as we identify the totality of our being as an ego, we've committed an act of violence, because we've separated in our consciousness ourselves from creation. And as soon as we do that, there's going to be anxiety, there's going to be a fear. Now we're competing for the scarce goods. as compared to how can we work cooperatively together, which has been the history, what the indigenous people did. How can we work cooperatively together to create a win-win for all of us? Because if any of us loses out, ultimately we all lose. And that's where we are now. So this is a long ramble, but hopefully.
It's beautifully put. And it raises lots of interesting questions for me. You do a lot of work with rites of passage. And I know that's an important part of your practice, and that you see the value in, I guess, socializing or re-socializing young people, and not just young people, into a different way of thinking. So can you imagine a time where our culture would design a rite of passage around psychedelics, or has it already, and used it that way as just a kind of one of the things you pass through becoming a member of our society, but that would socialize you in a different way than current rites of passage do, such as we have them.
Yeah. I love what when in How to Change Your Mind, in the introduction, you wrote about for the first time in history, the young had a rite of passage all their own, the acid trip, and Dad, you've done so much work with rites of passage, taking us and your grandkids out and on rites of passage, and yet how do we bring that to the masses, right? Because right now we're so divided. And how do we build these bridges so that more people can have access to rites of passage that are healthy and meaningful and lead to healthier ways of being?
Well, education, it starts with education, raising conscious awareness. With Biden and Kamala Harris coming into office, they're not going to magically change everything and everything's going to be cool and groovy, but they bring in an openness, because they're good human beings. They bring in an openness to begin to deal with truth instead of lies. Part of our healing means we need to bring awareness to the truth of the history of this country, which we have been lied to about from day one, and leads to the mythologies of Americans, exceptionalism, we're the defenders of freedom, the good guys around the world, when the opposite is true. So opening up our awareness to the truth of what has been, because we can only heal the wounds of the past if we address the truth of what has been. Opening our awareness to the truth of what is right now, and the truth of the potentiality of what could be. So education, raising consciousness, and the specifics of what, Michael, you were asking about rites of passage. You've read Huxley's Island, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he has a beautiful model of a rite of passage in his book, Island, about the young people, young teenagers who go through training with the elders in the culture that helps them learn how to deal with their feelings, helps them learn how to deal with their sexuality, helps them learn how to deal with power, helps them begin to open awareness to the gifts of life and how to be in responsible relationship with the gifts of life. And then when they've reached a certain point in their training where the elders that they've been working with see that they've reached that point, then they're introduced to the experience of the I think he called it the moksha.
Moksha.
Psychedelic medicine taken in a ritual ceremony with their peers who have gone through that kind of training. So the experience, it's facilitated, it's prepared for through education and through work and the different levels of the dimensionality of their being. They're brought into that experience that's led by an elder, and then their work with the fruits that come through that. When you take psychedelics, and you open to it and you surrender and you practice humility, you're going to get assignments. You're going to see what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get assignments, and it might take a kick in the ass to help you open up to, and this is what you need to do different if you really want healing, if you really want to achieve the higher potentials of what you're capable of living and being and co-creating with others in this life. You're going to get assignments, you're going to get homework. So the importance of recognizing the psychedelic experience is just one part of a larger whole: preparation, integration, following. And so raising consciousness about how the potentials of this tools, how it can be helpful to the difficulties and challenges we're facing today, and how it can be approached and used responsibly.
Yeah. And also what's significant, I think, about Huxley too, is he's saying that we may have to design our own rites of passage, that we can't necessarily take them from traditional cultures. That might not, I mean, we need our own container for this rite or for these powerful chemicals. And I think that's one of the really interesting cultural projects of the next few years. I mean, we have a medical model that's working pretty well and will probably lead to the approval of some of these substances as medicines. And we have a kind of religious model in that we have ayahuasca churches that have been recognized by the government. But there's some other model in between that I think still needs to be built, and it will probably borrow elements from traditional religions, but it's going to be something, a product of our culture. And in a way, the underground guides are working on that now. I mean, that they're developing ways to do exactly what you're describing. And because I do think that's very important to reach people who are, as you say, have angst. They're not necessarily mentally ill. They're not content with their lot, even though they're materially and doing very well, and that these medicines have something to offer them too. But the structure, the container, I think, is what's so important. And one of the things you bring as an elder in this movement is deep knowledge of the way they're used in traditional cultures, and that obviously is a very important resource for the rest of us, since these cultures know something we don't know or have not forgotten it. But I just wonder if those models need to be adapted in some ways to suit who we are now, because we're not, we've come a long way from any kind of, that kind of intimacy with nature, that kind of sense of oneness. Or do you think those models still work? I mean, you went to Mexico and you spent time with the Huichol, and do they need to be adapted, or can they be simply borrowed?
Well, I think there is need for adaptation of the forms, but I think the dynamics of the process have relevance no matter what the form. There needs to be some kind of preparation. How foolish it would be, of course, to just hand the substance out the way Leary suggested. You're asking for trouble, right?
Right.
So initial dynamic is preparation. There needs to be some kind of preparation. The form of that, the content of that, I think that's going to vary depending upon the specific population you're addressing. But that has to be addressed. Preparation.
Yes.
Looking at intention. Helping part of the preparation is the vital importance of intention. Why do you seek this? What's your purpose? What are you seeking? And if you're given what you're seeking, you may or may not be given what you're seeking. Well, and this is all part of the preparation process. Then what will you do with it? Will you honor what you're given? Because it might not be easy. It might be making major changes in your life that are not in your ego's comfort zone. But if you're sincere about seeking healing, if it's healing you're seeking, if you're sincere about wanting to raise your level of consciousness to a higher level for spiritual communion, for creative expression, so getting clear about your intention, and if you're given it, will you honor what you've been given? And then I think the interfacing dynamic is what are you willing to give of yourself in relationship to what you're seeking? And that in itself is like a stick in the spokes breaking set from our culture, because our culture is all about gimme, 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 take.
Right.
You won't give it to me, not a problem. We'll send in the Marines, kick your ass, and take it anyway. So what are you willing to give of yourself? So just those kinds of questions start to take people to a deeper level. So preparation is vital. And then I think it's vital to give people as part of the preparation, an understanding of what kind of the range of experiences they can have and how to work with those experiences. And that entails information about identity. that we've all grown up with an ego identity. And it's not that ego is bad, but the model I like is if you're driving in your car and you've got your 2-year-old child in the back or grandchild in the back and you're tired, you're not going to say, little Billy, would you come up here and take the steering wheel and I'm going to take a nap and you drive?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's what we do with our ego. In our ignorance, we've identified the totality of who we are as our ego and nothing more. And so we're missing the deepest part of who we are. So education, in regards to those dynamics, there's more to you than who you think you are. There's more to you than your stories. There's more to you than your dramas. There's more to you than I call your software programming about who you are. There's a whole lot more to you. And that's the divinity that's available to you through grace. So education about that. So when you take the medicine, you can have an experience, if you take enough, that begins to dissolve that ego identity. And then in our culture, oh, I'm going crazy, I'm losing my mind. That's a negative. And the truth is, on a deeper level of understanding, you are losing your mind.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. Praise be. There's more of your mind than you think. And this is an opportunity to practice surrendering and opening with humility to that larger that will inform and transform you. So teaching people something about the possibilities that can come through the experience. And then also, and then the second phase, however the form of it's going to be, is the experience itself. How do you set up the setting that's sacred to those people who are there? So if it's Catholics, there'd be Catholics. You create a setting that's meaningful to the people of that are coming into the experience. There's someone they trust, that they've been through a preparation process, who knows the territory, who knows how to work with the different possibilities that can come up and hold that container and support the people, and like a labor coach, helping them through their labor to deliver a healthy delivery. And then the third dynamic that I think is non-negotiable is the importance of emphasis on integration.
Yeah.
And those three dynamics, so to speak, I think those need to be there if we're going to have safe, responsible, productive, fruitful experiences for people. The specific forms of them, I think, as I referred to a moment ago, make it meaningful to the beliefs and values of the people you're working with.